Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. This event, Sharing Your Story of Welcome, is hosted by Welcome.us. We are a nonprofit, non-government organization founded in 2021 to equip and empower Americans to participate in the work of welcoming newcomers, primarily through sponsorship. And our mission continues today. As is our common practice, I'll begin with a few updates on the status of sponsorship-related policies. Next, we'll hear from fellow Welcome.us colleagues, partners, and sponsors on the how and why of sharing our story within our own networks in support of private sponsorship. I really believe whether you're a sponsor or a welcomer, you have a valuable story to share about why you care about newcomers, and people need to hear it. The objective of today's call is for you to feel more confident and equipped in sharing your story, whether through your immediate community, like your church, school district, or family members, or in the media. We hope our time together today will inspire and equip you to share your story to help others feel more informed and supportive of private sponsorship. Once again, my name is Krista Kartzen. I'm the Senior Director for Sponsorship Initiatives with Welcome.us, and thank you for joining us. As we've previously reported, the processes for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, or CHNV, has ended, and the Uniting for Ukraine, or U4U program, and the Welcome Corps private refugee sponsorship program are currently paused. Americans cannot submit new sponsorship applications, and existing applications will not be processed. This week, a federal judge granted a preliminary injunction on a lawsuit challenging the order suspending the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, which was issued on January 20th of this year. This executive order affected private refugee sponsorship, or the Welcome Corps program. In this ruling, the judge ruled that the government cannot enforce the suspension of the refugee program and must restore refugee processing and funding. I want to be clear that this does not mean that refugee processing and funding has been restored. We are still awaiting the written order with more details, and we do not know how the federal government will respond. We'll share updates as we have them on our website. On humanitarian parole sponsorship, a practice alert recently issued by the American Immigration Lawyers Association informed members that President Trump's administration may announce the termination of humanitarian parole, which could affect newcomers who arrived through CHNV or U4U. This has not been announced, but given the implications of this possibility, we advise sponsors and affected newcomers to consult with a competent attorney to explore alternative status options. This is especially urgent because we are now tracking recent media reports stating that on February 14th, the Department of Homeland Security issued an internal memo that suspended decision-making on all immigration applications filed by individuals who arrived to the U.S. through U4U and CHNV. The directive, as reported, means that USCIS will not approve any alternative forms of legal status many sponsored individuals are seeking while this pause is in place. This includes applications filed for asylum, temporary protected status, or TPS, employment authorization documents, advanced parole travel, adjustment of status to permanent residence, naturalization, and all other applications filed to USCIS. The memo has not been made public, and there is still a lot we don't know. Our previous guidance still stands at the moment. All newcomers who entered the U.S. with humanitarian parole and have not applied to an alternative legal status should seek advice from a competent immigration attorney and work with them to seek alternative status immediately if they desire to remain in the United States. Consult our guide to alternative status options linked in the chat for support. We will continue to monitor these policy changes and share updated recommendations on our website. In encouraging news, a bipartisan bill was introduced in Congress this week that would provide temporary guest status to Ukrainians and their immediate family members who are already in the U.S. through Uniting for Ukraine parole process. The bill allows Ukrainians to stay and work in the U.S., until the Secretary of State determines that hostilities in Ukraine have ceased and it is safe for them to return. As our members of Congress discuss and negotiate potential new policies, we as sponsors and welcomers have valuable experiences to help inform the future of private sponsorship programs. One way to connect with your elected officials is by attending a local town hall event. Right about this time of year, many elected officials host town halls for the public to attend and share their questions and opinions about policies like private sponsorship. You can learn more about upcoming town halls from your elected officials through their websites, social media, or the mailers they may send out. Another way to engage with elected officials to inform policymaking is by simply calling or emailing their offices. You can use our guide linked in the chat to tell your members of Congress that you want to see sponsored newcomers continue to be able to stay and work legally in the United States. Some of you know that I welcomed a Ukrainian family along with my mom. Hi, Mom. She asked me how she can easily share our guide on Facebook. So as of today, we added a new section on the last page of the guide with sample language and a graphic to make it easier for you to share on social media. When you post it, it will look something like this, and your social media connections will be able to click the link to send a quick message to their officials as well. So contacting our members of Congress is one quick way that we as sponsors and welcomers can share our support. But if you have more time to spare, there are other meaningful ways to share your experience with your community, whether it's within your congregation, professional network, civic group, or with the broader public. Here to share more about why your story matters in that community context is my Welcome.us colleague, Sahar Sarshar, who leads our storytelling efforts. Sahar has produced many of the Welcome.us videos you've seen on our website and has keen insight on the impact that these stories have. Sahar, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Krista. As Krista mentioned, I'm Sahar. I'm executive producer of storytelling and content here at Welcome.us. Along with a dedicated team, I help share stories about welcomers like you. And I've seen firsthand how these stories have changed hearts and minds. I want you to know that your voice can make an impact. Real stories build real connections. When people hear or read your story of welcome, it helps them see the human side of the issue. It allows them to connect with a lived experience rather than a headline or secondhand information. It's about real people who others can trust with stories that touch the heart and challenge misconceptions or misinformation. At the moment, there's a lot of competing attention for our elected officials. To break through the noise, we need a lot of voices. Politicians pay attention when they see that people in their community are passionate about welcoming and sponsoring refugees. These leaders and their staff read the local paper, watch the local news, scroll through social media, and ultimately care about what you care about. Sharing your story with your friends, your networks, and the media could help keep these programs alive and thriving. Personal experiences can play a vital role in building broad support and awareness. When more people understand the realities of sponsorship, it can lead to stronger community support for refugee initiatives. There's a ripple effect, and when you tell your story, it encourages others to speak up too. Suddenly, there's a wave of support that gets people talking, from neighbors to your congregations to local and national media. Your voice can even make it to Congress. We already see that happening, and we'll share that with you shortly.
Thank you so much, Sahar. As you mentioned, that ripple effect can go farther than we expect when we engage in even the simplest of conversations. Just a couple weeks ago, I shared with my church during Sunday service that the refugee family we'd hoped to sponsor had been affected by the program's pause, and we aren't going to welcome them. And after that announcement, two people who just recently started attending the church came up to me to learn more about private sponsorship and what they could do to help. Those conversations just might spur two more, and so on. I also recently shared my church's sponsorship experience with a reporter from Christianity Today through World Relief, which was the organization supporting us. to Sahar's point, having my personal sponsorship voice along with other churches and World Relief's policy expertise in that article built both a deeply personal and a well-informed narrative around our work of welcoming. And hopefully it was relatable, inspiring to other churches across the country, even if they hadn't sponsored. Before the journalist interviewed me, I spoke with another colleague, Marissa Astor, for a brief training on how to share my story effectively. Marissa is a communications strategist and media relations expert with more than a decade of experience in advocacy, issue-based, and public affairs campaigns. And I wanted to give you all the same opportunity that I had to learn from her. So thank you for joining us, Marissa.
Great. Thank you, Krista. And thank you all for being here. And most importantly, thank you for the very important role that you all play in welcoming newcomers into your communities. You all have already heard about the power of storytelling and how sharing your sponsorship journey can help build awareness and change. What I'm here to talk about are some different ways that you can share your story, both in your immediate community, with people in your broader network, through social media, or in the press. Then I'll share some practical tips on how storytelling can be used to help move the needle. So to start, how to share your experience. There are many different ways to share your story, and it's important to remember that the best method for you is the one that feels the most natural. Your local community is often a great place to start, from community meetings and events, religious institutions, civic organizations, your child's school, or even an alumni group. Sometimes the most effective way to increase awareness is simply through word of mouth, because these personal conversations let you connect with people on a deeper level. But beyond in-person gatherings, you can share your lived experience with sponsorship through a newsletter that an organization you belong to may run, through a personal website, or your social media accounts. And these often allow you to reach a much wider audience. And if you're comfortable, media coverage is also a great way to amplify your story even further. This could include speaking with local media, a major national news outlet, a smaller niche publication, or specialty media like the one Krista mentioned with her piece in Christianity Today. And media engagement can also take many different forms. As you'll see in the last column, a letter to the editor is a brief, often 250 words on average, and direct piece. Something like an op-ed, which is short for opposite editorial, is often a longer piece and offers a deeper analysis or a contrary argument to something that's in the paper's opinion section. These tend to be much harder to land, so we really recommend sticking with a letter to the editor, which is a lot more manageable. You may also have the opportunity to participate in print, radio, or even television interviews, where you can share your story in the form of a conversation. As we'll discuss in a little bit, Welcome.us has numerous resources to support you here as well. On the next two slides, we have a couple examples of sponsors, some of whom have joined us today, that have written letters to the editor in major news outlets like the New York Times, but also in local newspapers, as you'll see with the Florida Times-Union. And in one case, Angela, who you'll be hearing from momentarily, gave an interview to her local newspaper, and the paper's editorial board took interest, recognizing the broad implications for the community. And a few days later, after her interview was published, the paper actually ran an editorial providing the paper's official view in a piece that called for the legal status, the continued legal status of Uniting for Ukraine beneficiaries. So whichever format you prefer, it's important to follow best practices for communicating effectively, because you want to ensure that your story is both represented accurately and that you protect the privacy of those that you have sponsored. So I'm going to talk through really briefly a little bit about how you can share your sponsorship experience and tell it as a story. To start, every compelling story has a structure, whether that's a book, a movie, or the work that you have done to welcome newcomers. When you talk about your journey, you want to take people through the key moments that will define the impact you've had. You should start by laying a foundation. So in practice, all this means is identifying yourself as a sponsor or a welcomer and explaining what brought you to this work. Laying this out up front helps build credibility and it'll connect your audience to your overall message. Next, you'll want to introduce your audience to the immediate problem you're working to address. So for example, for many of you, it will be explaining that because of recent policy changes, people who arrived here legally through government authorized pathways are now at immediate risk of losing their humanitarian parole status. And doing this after you state your connection to the subject matter will help capture the attention and show them why they should care about this. In the middle, you'll want to provide additional context that will be helpful for your audience. So while it may seem a little bit counterintuitive to go back and talk more about what sponsorship involves after you've introduced it, your goal here is to start with the most pertinent information to make this timely, and then provide additional context to help your audience better understand the issue. So for example, you might explain that many newcomers face language barriers or financial challenges and are dealing with the difficulties that come with navigating a new country. And as a sponsor, you recognize these challenges and are stepping up to help. Then you want to further define your role and what you are doing as a sponsor to make a difference. One of the things that often gets overlooked is the fact that sponsorship is more than just financial support. It's about creating a welcoming community. You help families find housing, secure jobs, enroll kids in school, and feel a sense of belonging. It's about walking alongside them as they rebuild their lives, and these are all really important details that are part of your story. You also want to be sure to demonstrate the impact of this work so you can leave your audience with a clear call to action. Think about anecdotes you can add that show the value of sponsorship. Maybe it's sharing that the family you sponsored who arrived with nothing and within a year found stability, work, and was able to move into their own home. Maybe it's not just how you helped the family resettle, but underscoring how you also benefited from their friendship. These stories can help demonstrate that sponsorship not only changed lives, but has the power to transform entire communities. Finally, you want to leave on a note that tells your audience what you want them to do. So how can others moved by your story do something to help? As Krista mentioned, one example is to encourage people to contact their representatives, and welcome.us has a tool exactly for that. To wrap up here, I want to leave everyone with a few best practices to help you tell your story in the most effective way possible. The 4 pillars I want you to remember are to deliver your message with clarity, urgency, and humanity. So you're going to identify key themes and reflect on what aspects of your own sponsorship experience were most meaningful or transformative. You want to either write or speak in a way that is easy to understand, conveys the significance of your work, and connects with your audience at an emotional level. Strike the right tone. Authenticity makes your story relatable and powerful. So it's important to share both the joys and the challenges of sponsorship. By making it personal, you are letting the individuality of your experience shine through. Keep it concise. We all know attention spans are limited, so be direct, avoid jargon or any extraneous details, and opt for clear and memorable language. And finally, be mindful of how you share the personal details of the newcomers that you've sponsored. There are many ways that you can communicate your message while also respecting their privacy. In practice, this could mean letting a journalist know before the interview begins that there are certain topics or questions that are off limits, and most of the time, they will be very happy to accommodate. By keeping these 4 pillars in mind, you don't just inform, you inspire others. Stories like yours have the power to bring more people into this movement, as we've talked about before. So to get you started, welcome.us has added these best practices and additional inspiration to a new webpage for storytellers on our website, which we're going to share in the chat and in our follow-up email. And finally, remember that welcome.us is here for you. please feel free to reach out to the Welcome.us storytelling team with any questions. Krista will let you know at the end of this webinar how to get in touch with us. And I will just close by expressing my sincere gratitude for your time, your generosity, and for your willingness to make your voice heard. This work is important and it matters. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And now it's really my honor to introduce you all to three sponsors with truly remarkable stories. Angela, Christy, and Elizabeth have joined us to share their experiences, learnings, and impact when speaking about sponsorship within their own communities and with the media. Welcome, friends. And Angela, a very special thank you for joining us for the second time this month. We had the privilege to hear from you during our last webinar about your experience speaking with congressional representatives. And I encourage folks to check that out if they haven't seen it just yet. But today we'd love to hear more about your community level engagement. When we met earlier this week, you said your starting point is really asking yourself, who in my community is most impacted by these policy changes that we're seeing? Who does it really matter to? And then you went from there. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about how you went about identifying those folks and sharing your story with them?
Sure. So I am the president and founder of Iowa NICE, which stands for Iowa Newcomer Integration Community and Exchange. We're in Eastern Iowa. And what started out as myself personally just sponsoring a couple families ended up being just a beautiful community effort. In fact, our organization was formed because the community met the people who we had brought here first, and they fell in love with them, and they said, wow, how can we help you do more of this? And so it wasn't something that was planned, but the community rallied, and we now have welcomed around 76 people into our immediate community and helped quite a few others. And so that's a little bit about us, but it's important to understand, because when we all started getting news of announcements, changes with immigration policy, I had to think about who are the stakeholders, who are the people who will be most interested, because I felt it was really important that we give those people the opportunity to hear what's going on first, have factual information, and sort of keep a hopeful, upbeat message or tone, because there's a lot of technical details here that many people don't understand. And my concern was just that we don't have people being overly alarmed or misinformed. And so in my case, very much a lot of community involvement. We started out just putting information on Facebook, and and by the way, Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, they are always looking for speakers. So that's a great place to start. But since we started our program, we've done so much of that the community just really widely knows us, and we had already had many news stories run and so forth. So when these announcements started taking place, I immediately asked myself, which were the biggest donors? Our local bankers who have financed mortgages, employers that were involved, our faith community, the school, because some of the children might be afraid they're going to lose their friends. It was all of those people, right? Our Chamber of Commerce, all the people who really have taken such a sense of pride in our program. I kind of went through and I said, who are these individuals and what's the best way to reach them?
Just amazing, Angela. Thank you. And we're going to hear a little bit more from you later. But I also wanted to invite Christy to share. Christy, as a sponsor and in your work with the National Immigration Forum, you have had a deep breadth of experience sharing your story. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us more about your experience? How do you convey your story and help the communities that you support to do the same?
Hi, Christy Statz. I live in Northeast Ohio, and I am the Assistant Vice President of Field and Constituencies, which is a long title. But what I was thinking, actually reflecting even as we were having the training, is I'm here because of a story. So I was in full-time Christian ministry for 15 years, mostly overseas, and then in the US. And my entry into eventually my family's story that I've sponsored was 10 years ago. I was working and leading my church in a national organization's refugee ministry and discovered how broken immigration was. And I discovered all these things, I had no idea about my own immigration system. And then fast forward, I eventually was asking questions and telling the stories as I was learning them that everybody has. So many people don't know. And so as I was learning, I would share on Facebook, I would share with my friends, I would share with my church. I had no idea. And so where I'm at now with sponsorship was I have been working for an immigration advocacy organization, really trying to educate folks with the same things I didn't understand many years ago about immigration. And in the process of that, I met a family from Afghanistan. I was looking for stories to have journalists cover because while we partnered with Afghans for the entirety of our time there with our military, the entire time there was a program that allowed allies who became in danger out of partnership with our military to be able to have a visa to come to the US. There's very few visas available for anyone to come, but this is for people who are in acute danger because of their partnership with the US military, and their role had been to keep our military members safe. And so I was looking for stories of people who had not had this visa processed and had been waiting for a long time. So one of the things I knew that I knew most of the public didn't know is that under 4 different presidential administrations, it didn't matter what party, there was a will, but there just wasn't the processing that made it fast enough. And in the course of getting this story done, I heard this family's story. They were in Kabul. They had already been in hiding for 2 years. And it was in the spring of 2021, and there was a bureaucratic mess with their particular situation. So I got involved, and they did not get evacuated when they should have in 2021. And so it came all the way to the point where the opportunity to privately sponsor them came up last year. My friends and I got involved. And so for me, it was hearing a story and realizing they actually really fit the visa category, and there was an opportunity, but due to bureaucracy, they weren't here yet. And so I advocated for their special immigrant visa. And when that still hasn't come in, I got involved in private sponsorship. And so the way I've done it is by, telling people personally, but also writing letters in a bigger way, writing to my friends and family, educating people. And so when I told people about this family's story with their permission, people came on board really quickly to want to help sponsor them.
Thank you, Christy. That resonates so much because I feel like I'm just learning every day myself. We're having these webinars and we're putting out policy notices and things like that, but I'm also learning right alongside you all. And it really, I want to just double click on the fact that we can share our story and we don't need to have all the answers. I think that I don't have all the answers, and but we're still able to share what we do know and what our stories are. And so I just so appreciate that encouragement.
Just to throw out there, this is what I think the compelling nature of story is. This has had nothing to do with my job. So journalists did their story and that was it. I could have walked on, but I knew there was one thing I could do, and I got involved personally on my own time. And so I think that's the thing, as we hear stories, it's like people aren't just part of, not many people work in this space, but not part of what your job is, but it's like I could get involved in this personally. And so that's how it tumbled.
100%. Thank you, Christy. I think that's a great segue back to Angela, because you've also stepped into the media spotlight to share your story. It's not always easy to open up to the public, so I'm curious, what is it like to be interviewed by local media, and what impact has it had in your community?
I'm unmuted. Yeah, you can hear me? Okay. So, I think it's when you think about doing a news interview, I think it's really scary, but I think what makes it easier, certainly in my case, is, and I think for many of us, right, if we're sponsors, is that we really do have a very personal experience that we can share. It's not as though we're giving a speech where we have to be experts in anything. These are things we know a lot about because we've been experiencing it and we've been there, to hold the hands of our friends we welcomed here from Ukraine. And so I think it's easier to tell the story unscripted, but with keeping in mind some just basic elements that help the viewers to understand. So for me anyway, as much as I hate being on film, I really do feel it's important to get the story out there. And I don't find it hard to speak from the heart and to share with the media. And I think this is what they're looking for. They want the human side of things. They want the story that's going to touch their viewers. And it's not hard for us, right? It's so easy to recall that moment when you knew it was like the right thing to do. Um, and I know we all have those moments, but just sharing the little details of life, right? So I think those are the things the reporters are looking for. I think if we can take steps to make their jobs easier, that's a huge win for us, and they get a better result out of their story. And so by that, I mean just making sure that you've got some background, maybe some area for B-roll, which is kind of extra film, right? But those are the kinds of things that I think have made it easier. And then, just talking to those reporters as though we're all talking here. You're just kind of sharing your story. That's made it really helpful. And we've actually done a lot of these interviews. They tend to want to come back after they hear a little bit of the story. They want to follow up and say, how did it go? And what's new, what's next? And one of the things that's been important to me, and the reason that we've taken the time to do so many, is because a lot of people are very upset about the topics, right? And people tend to react in different ways. And our community appreciates and I think needs kind of a calm, kind of a rational, positive outlook, kind of a voice. And so I feel like our organization feels like that's somewhat our responsibility to do that. And I let the media know. I want to cover this, but I want to keep it very upbeat. You can help our community, by keeping the story positive, and they've been wonderful to work with.
That is so beautiful, Angela. Thank you. Elizabeth, I'm also so grateful that you're joining us today. You might not know it, but you were one of the first sponsors I connected with when I first joined Welcome.us. And I know you've had a long road of sponsoring 2 Ukrainian families with additional family members whose applications are now paused. So even talk about those little life moments that Angela mentioned. In the midst of these challenges, that hasn't even stopped you from doing media interviews and sharing your story. Can you tell us more about what that experience has been like for you too?
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure to connect again with you, Krista. And I want to thank Welcome US for everything you've done to facilitate first refugees coming under U4U and other programs, and now giving us these guidelines. I was inspired initially to want to help by a brilliant student from Afghanistan, a woman who had had to flee the Taliban in order to pursue her education. I wanted to find a way to help as well. And as you mentioned, Krista, my husband and I, with our co-sponsors, John and Fonda Eiler in St. Augustine, Florida, where we live, have brought 2 U4U families to our local community. Now, to me, the key to engaging with media is when you have stressed. It's telling a compelling story. And I have to say the process, as it has been for others, has been enormously rewarding. Welcome US believed that we had a story that would resonate strongly with the public and could provide a basis for media interviews. Briefly, I met Grigory, a Ukrainian man looking for a safe place for his family while he remained in Ukraine to fight. We decided to sponsor his wife, Ina, her sister, Ludmila, and their children, Margot and Max. We welcomed them in September of 2022, and then wonderfully, Grigory was able to join us in January of 2023. Now, we had hoped, deeply hoped, to sponsor Ludmila's husband and her oldest son. But with the recent policy changes, this door to safety has officially closed, not only for this family, but for thousands of Ukrainians simply wanting to reunite with their families. Ludmila has been devastated by this change, but she is passionate about getting her story out and has embraced the opportunity to talk with media. Now, I should point out at the same time, she is not yet fluent enough in English to make media interviews fully comfortable for her. So one key to ensure a successful media interview with some of our Ukrainian beneficiaries is simply been enabling a friend fluent in English and Ukrainian to join. For Ludmila, she brought a friend to help with her conversational flow so that she could focus on her story and not worry about struggling with English. And Luda and I have just been enormously grateful for the opportunity to speak up on behalf of U4U and its benefits. And I just know there are 1,000 other stories out there that will resonate as ours has done.
I know it too, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Marissa shared earlier in her presentation that writing a letter to the editor is one option to get your story out in the media. And as she mentioned, it's typically maybe 250 words, which is basically one page of double-spaced text. Christy, I know you've had a few published. What was it like to put your story into words for the public, and how has it shaped the conversation around refugee sponsorship in Ohio?
So it's nerve-wracking at first, but the more you do it, the more fun it is. The most difficult part is to make it short. So cut all your extraneous words and do short sentences. So I will say 3 things I've noticed in putting them together. So one is to have kind of a hook, like what's your top line story you want people to hear so that they'll read the rest of the 200 words. The second is to if I can make it personal, in some way, I try to. Most of these things are very personal to me, so that's not too hard. And I'll also say it could be a wide range of it. So somebody might come at it from their profession. Maybe it has to do with their own family's immigration history. For me, a lot of it comes in my convictions as a Christian. So there's often a lot of Bible verses in my editorials. And then the ask. And so at the very end, I usually will have an ask, like, what do I want to change? And it might be directed at a particular political figure, somebody who has the power to make this happen. So an example, and I'm just going to extemporaneously tell you guys a very short version of what I'm working on this week. It's not even written yet, but my family, I'm going to have pseudonyms for them because I don't want to put their names out there, but my family had 40 high security contracts with our military in Afghanistan. And despite having to go into hiding because of their service to us and their belief in democracy, they applied for their special immigrant visa and waited years and then got to the end of the process and found out the wrong person in the chain of command wrote their commendation letter. They had to start all over. And that's when I met them. And I thought, that is so frustrating. They couldn't find the right person. And I thought, that's a Google search. So my friend in the military and I reached out to an Army sergeant. We spent a month and a half Googling and we finally found him. We found the man's cell phone number and got in touch and told him the story. And he remembered our friend and he said he'd write them the letter. And he did. And we got it the day before Kabul fell. It was too late and they didn't get out during the evacuation. And so I spent the next 3 years pestering Congress, asking for them to hurry up and sorry, my words are not as good as one on paper, but to hurry up and process this family, and they still have not waited. And so a year ago, when the opportunity to privately sponsor them came up, my friends and I got together, and within about 5 weeks, we had raised all the money, completed all of the training, gone through our background checks, gone through our training, and were able to submit their application so that they could come to the US. They went through more training, more background checks through all of our different federal security agencies, and they finished everything by the end of November. And due to the recent bans on refugees and the pause of this program, our friends can no longer come to the US. It's a husband, a wife, and 3 children. And my request is that the administration would restart refugee resettlement so that our friends can live in freedom and have their kids go to school. So it'll be something like that. And then obviously I'd have to cut some words to make it shorter, but that's a little bit about what the process would be like.
Christy, I know you're a sponsor because of your persistence. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your story. I look forward to seeing that letter to the editor soon. Elizabeth, I'd like to hear from you too. How did you go about writing your letter to the editor, I know welcome.us supported you, and our storytelling team supported you in that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to focus it down to those 250 words, and what was the process like working with our storytelling team?
As Christy says, it's a challenge, those 250 words. But Welcome You asked if I would be interested in drafting a letter to the editor, and I leapt at the suggestion. And I have to say the team at Welcome US made the process extraordinarily easy and just joyful. They give help drafting and refining letters to meet that narrow publication specification in a letter to the editor. And we had our story, the affection we had developed for our Ukrainian family, their joy at finally being able to bring Ludmila's husband and older son to safety in America into the new house they had purchased, and their shattering disappointment at this legal pathway being closed. This is a powerful story because everyone knows what it feels like to have a dream and have that dream denied or destroyed. Sponsorship profoundly changes the lives of sponsors and families they welcome, as you know. And when we close the pathways, we turn away from our core values and deny ourselves the contributions these newcomers can bring. The message, of course, is we'd love to see America expand, not eliminate these programs, to hold up ideals that we always have held as a country.
Oh, Elizabeth, I have chills. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I have just one more question for each of you, and it's the same all around. We'd love to hear, maybe in a minute or less, what is one piece of advice that you have for viewers who might be interested in sharing their stories? And we'll go Elizabeth, Christy, and Angela.
Okay. My advice is simple. As you would guess, find your story. Stories that involve children also carry a powerful message. I've spoken about the way Ludmila misses her husband and elder son. I haven't mentioned how Max is desperately missing his father as he grows into manhood. So share your story everywhere you can. Community gatherings, letters to the editor, media interviews. Stories are one of the most effective ways we have to communicate with each other, engaging our listeners not only through ideas, but also through emotion in order to create the change we desire.
Amazing. Thank you. Christy?
And I would say believe that they matter and that they work. And so an example is in some of the editorials I've written, I've even had some op-eds. I've had loads of people get in touch with me that I would have never imagined were really impacted by what I wrote or said, I had no idea. And so I think it's believing the best that these stories could really help invite somebody to join us and to join what we're trying to do. I've even had some of my editorials, and I'm talking very tiny little corner, third, fourth page of a paper. I've had handwritten letters come to me from senators' offices, and I'm like, how did they even find that? They clearly had some staffer who's like combing through it, saying they read my editorial and they really appreciated what I was trying to say, or they've reflected on what I wrote. And I don't know senators personally, so to find like some little girl in the middle of a suburb in Ohio can write something and they're paying attention and it's helping them shape what kind of policies they focus on. So know that you can have impact.
Fantastic. Christy, thank you. Angela, what is your piece of advice for us?
I guess my piece of advice would be to not forget how much of a difference these stories and getting these stories out can potentially have as it relates to actual policy that will make a difference. And so I think, making it personal, not just for the sponsor and the family, but also personal for the communities, like, sharing how the communities have rallied around these folks. I think if we can communicate a positive tone and help the listeners, the viewers, the readers understand the widespread impact this has had in your communities, whether it be through the church organizations, the schools, help communicate how how many people are impacted by the joy of welcoming these families to our communities. Because I do think that if we can be leaders in keeping that message positive and sharing the overall impact, whether that impact be humanitarian, whether it be, bringing communities together with, diversity and growth and jobs and, population growth. I mean, there's so many benefits of bringing these families into our community. But if we can get those messages out, then our policymakers are more likely to listen. And if we don't lead, and I told one of our business leaders in the community a few weeks ago, we were having a discussion. We said, should we or shouldn't we be asking people to write letters, or should we not be public because we don't want to put pressure on our policymakers, that kind of a thing. And at the end of the day, my response, and I believe it's been the right response, has been that if we don't lead those conversations, if we don't become leaders with that dialogue and keeping it positive and keeping it focused on the things that matter, then somebody else will. Because there's a lot of people passionate. Some have no real information about this topic. So I feel like our responsibility is to set the tone, open up those conversations. And as a result, our group has literally gone into the local offices for our senators and representatives with family members and been welcomed and had hugs, and we're developing relationships. But it's because we've built networks of positive conversation and avoided heading the wrong direction. And I think that at the end of the day, guys, stories are great, but we've got to find a way to bring everybody on board with the vast number of benefits that come out of these programs.
Thank you, Angela. Wow, if we don't share our stories, then somebody else will.
Right.
How powerful. I can just keep talking with y'all all afternoon, and I'm so sorry to end this conversation because I'm so encouraged by all three of you, and hearing your stories has certainly made me feel all the more inspired to keep this conversation going. Thank you all so very much. And as our speakers explored today, there are many ways you can share your story based on your availability and unique circumstances, whether you're chatting with a friend or giving a media interview. A great place to start will be to take a look at our Guide to Supporting Sponsorship page, which Marissa introduced in the chat earlier. This page was developed especially to help relay the content shared in this webinar. So whether you have 5, 10, or 15 minutes to spare, it includes quick references to help you identify those folks in your community who will care about your message and then effectively share your story. And as you see on the slide, storytelling is one of the 4 primary ways that we at welcome.us are supporting sponsors. And I hope you'll take us up on this offer. Our storytelling team offers a 15-minute consultation call where they can go over your outreach goals, your experience, and offer resources to help you craft and share your story, just like they did with Elizabeth and Angela, whether it's for a letter to the editor, local media engagement, or other opportunities. So to set up a call, you'll have the chance to indicate your interest in the post-webinar survey that will pop up after this closes. Or alternatively, feel free to just send us an email at stories@welcome.us and let us know you're interested in a storytelling consultation. You've already met Sahar, and she'll be the friendly face on the other side of the email responding back. Next, would you believe that this is our 5th webinar of 2025 already? Maybe you've joined us for all 5, or maybe this is your first one, but collectively, these events have had nearly 18,000 views, tallying both the live participants and the YouTube views. Just in the last month, we've also hosted several smaller private community meetings with sponsors across the country to create a more intimate space for folks to hear policy briefings. And actually, they come off mute, they ask questions and share resources with each other that have been helpful to them. And through these smaller meetings, we've connected with sponsors who are sharing their stories, just like the sponsors you just heard from, with community leaders, media outlets, and their elected officials. And we'd like to keep those conversations going. So if you're interested in connecting directly with other sponsors and welcomers in a more organized fashion, let us know. We'd love to connect with you and connect you with others in your state. If you'd like to be part of this new effort, just indicate your interest in the post-webinar survey or send us an email at stories@welcome.us and let us know your interest and include your name and your state. So if you want to take us up on both offers, just send us one email at stories@welcome.us and we'll respond in the coming days. We also do value this time with you as a national community of sponsors and welcomers. So we're launching a new monthly webinar series, what we're calling welcome.us at the table, designed for welcomers who care about private sponsorship pathways, the newcomers we've welcomed, and the stories of welcome that unite us. These virtual events will take place on the third Thursday of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern. So please join us for our next call on Thursday, March 20th. We'll share the registration link in the chat, and you'll also receive it along with a recording of this webinar in a follow-up email. Lastly, we remain committed to providing you with timely, accurate, and clear policy updates, which are shared through policy explainers, FAQs, and other resources on our website and through emails. So you could check out our website and subscribe to receive email alerts on the page linked in the chat as well. I want to thank you all so much for your time today and for sharing your unique story. It's a story that only you can tell, and it matters. If I could just ask for one moment of your time, a survey will pop up once this session ends, and we'd really appreciate it if you could answer just a couple questions for us, especially if you want to engage with us in storytelling or to connect with other sponsors. So please, we'll just respond to that survey. We'll get back to you in the coming days. But without further ado, on behalf of all of us at welcome.us, once again, we're so, so grateful for you. Your compassion and dedication to supporting newcomers continues to inspire us every single day. Thank you, and be well.